It was announced over the weekend that indeed Chauncey Billups is going nowhere.
Yeah.
He was extended.
Yes.
He got a multi-year agreement as well as Joe Cronin, so it seems that Cronin and Billups are lockstep for the next 3 seasons at the minimum. And so they held the press conference early yesterday. I couldn't have been more wrong. We were doing predictions, and I said I thought they'd kick the can down the road. That was not the case. They wanted to keep Billups. And so the Blazers extended Chauncey Billups and held the press conference yesterday. Got a lot of cuts. But what was your reaction? Because you guys actually broke the news to me. I was on the golf course.
Yeah, Swag broke the news. He was the one that first saw it. I wasn't plugged into my phone at that point.
Well, also, let me be fair.
Yeah.
Creeping back into our lives.
Hello.
Door creaks open, just like in a movie. Hi, guys. It's me, Dwight James. Chauncey's coming back. Oh,
was he the one that had the report that I missed?
He was the one that broke it. He had the scoop. I want to give fair credit. Dwight James broke it.
He's got the scoop.
He had it on his Substack.
Yeah.
I did not see the Substack, but he had it on the Substack.
It was on the stack, on the sub.
And so fair is fair, and all love and breaking news. Dwight James of DwightJamesSubstack.com /Read Sports Now broke the Chauncey Billups is staying as the Blazer coach.
I mean, my initial reaction was I'm not surprised in the least. I've been bringing this up mainly throughout the entire year, where it's been a foregone conclusion for some that he's going to be gone. And I would just ask, when was the last time this organization did the thing that seemed like a foregone conclusion? It seemed like it was a foregone conclusion that Anthony Simons would get traded 2 years ago when they drafted guards in back-to-back top 10 drafts.
Oh, I got thoughts on that.
And he's still here. He's probably still going to be here next year. So, when was you drafted a center in the top 10. You already had 2 other centers on the roster. Seemingly it would make sense that one of those centers would get traded because you just took one of the top 10. That seemed like the obvious thing to do, and the organization did not do it. So I'm not surprised in the least. The timing of it was interesting. I don't know why, if you're giving them both extensions, you wouldn't have just done it at the same time. Maybe you wanted each of them to have their moment in the sun with Cronin and with Chauncey. But, hey, when you're heading in this skyrocket direction of NBA championships to come, you got to keep your coach and your GM around.
Here is the GM, Joe Cronin, on what you just suggested there, the timing of this and how it came to be with Chauncey's announcement of his extension.
The last couple of years, it's been complicated. From, a team that we hoped could be competitive a few years ago to a team that had a really rough season the year prior to, very subpar start to this season. So those are tough, navigating that as a group, and that's something I'm really proud of, is how we stayed together. Nobody panicked. We believed in what we were building. We believed in, the group of people we have, including, of course, the players that we have. And when we started taking those steps, it was, I don't think it was anything that surprised us. We just didn't know exactly when that was going to happen. When those guys, started playing the level of defense that we expected, when they, started to be more and more connected, when, we started winning ball games and being really competitive on a nightly basis, that changed everything for us. And we're really proud of, what's happened this second half of the season.
There's a lot of cuts I want to get to that we have from Cronin and Chauncey since Chauncey got here. And by the way, the one thing that becomes revisionist in some ways is we kind of act like he got here and the roster was gutted at that point. And that wasn't the case.
It was not the case.
I don't know if it's in a cut, but I just want to get out in front and say it in case it's not. He basically admitted yesterday that he was not ready to be a head coach.
I feel like he's done that every time he's done an interview of like, man, I've grown so much and I've learned so much. It's like, you were billed as the guy who came in to put us over the top because Terry Stotts was the problem.
He admitted that he was not ready to be a guy that takes a team over the top. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Your former agent gave you that job without any real experience.
You're telling me 1 year as an assistant isn't enough experience? Is that what you're telling me?
No, 6 months of coaching basketball is not enough.
But
he is here, and these have been the records: 27-55, 33-49, 21-61, and they finished this season 36-46. That has been the 4-year run of Chauncey, and him and Joe got extensions. Here was their turnaround, and Chauncey talked about the defense. When they took their defense seriously is when all this changed.
I kind of got to a point with our squad, who it was, the name on the back of the jersey, the salary, the whatever, I didn't care. We were sinking, and we were sinking pretty bad. I said, I'm going to play the guys. They're going to compete and play defense. And if you don't do that, I don't care. You're just not going to play. And I meant that. And they felt that. And it really brought us together to be honest with you. And, you know, the guys started seeing the beauty in being competitive and the beauty in playing defense. And it's what I've always said, like when you have a connected group, they're just very difficult to play against. And so they kind of got lost in that.
There was a question also asked to them that I don't believe we polled, but it was just something worth mentioning. They kind of, in a way, gave a real vibe that winning 10 of 11 games kind of decided all of this.
That was it. That's all you needed
There
to
was
see.
a little bit of that
That's
I
all
took
you
away
needed.
from watching that press conference.
That's all you needed, man. When you win 36 games, I kind of rolled my eyes throughout the entirety of it. Look, there's a balance of wanting to be fair and rational in the analysis of this. Like, the roster the last 2 years has been horrible, and no coach in the history of the league would win any sort of significant amount of games with that roster. I do chuckle at this idea of him having to grow as a coach because he was brought in as the finishing piece. He was his championship experience as a player will put us over the top. And for the first 2 years he was here, the goal was to not tank. That became an eventuality throughout the course of the season.
Yeah.
But the last last year mainly, the roster was atrocious and they planned on tanking and it was bad. I had a moment throughout this, and I probably did it a dozen times when I finally sat down and watched it last night, where it just, like, they are really setting themselves up for next year. And I'm glad that eventually Bill Oram held their feet to the fire, because for the entirety of this press conference, it was, everything is great. We're going in the right direction. Look how bright the future is. We might have our superstars. Like, it was just, look how high we can soar, everybody. And then finally, Oram was the one that stepped up and was like, well, if you're selling us this, does that mean the playoffs are happening next year?
Is that basically the
Is
bar?
that the end
Is it the
goal?
playoffs?
Which it should be. If you're telling me that this is such a great roster and look, all this internal development that's going to happen, we're so young, we got all these weapons in the offseason, we got cap space, we got future draft picks, we got a lot of stuff to play with. Like, they're really selling you that the future is bright. And I personally don't see that level of future. I think you're still a star away. But I did have to roll my eyes a few times at just acting as if this was an incredible success story, which they certainly exceeded expectations. I will give them credit for that.
Yeah.
But when you look at the second half of the year, I believe by my math, now I'm not going to count yesterday because they played a D-League roster yesterday, and the Lakers had nothing to play for. I believe by my math, they beat two teams with a winning record in the second half of the season, and in both instances, the best player on the team didn't play.
Well, we can get into that too, because I went through some numbers last night, because we're doing this, splitting it up into 41 games. One part of that doesn't count, but the one other part does count when it comes to all of what we're talking about, extensions, the future. It's primarily based on a 40. They describe it themselves as a half the season, 41 games.
41 game sample size.
So,
who cares about the first half of the year? That doesn't matter.
That didn't
It's
count.
just the second half of the year.
And I went to the point in the calendar where the 41 games split exactly starts, and I went through some numbers, and I'll tell you some of those numbers, and I want to ask this question because I want to get to the superstar part of this. They talked about that yesterday. There was a cut from Joe on basically saying what they accomplished makes them feel that taking big swings with young talent is no longer a big priority. Well, not priority, but not a mandate.
Not
is
a
how
necessity,
I should phrase that.
yeah.
And so I want to get to some of the numbers. I want to get to this audio, and I asked this going into the break. Is basing everything going forward for the next 3 years, is it fair to do that on a 41-game sample size if you truly believed in that 41-game sample size? Is that enough of a sample in 4 full seasons of Chauncey Billups for you to conclude this should keep going?